Hi, I'm Mano Marks. Welcome to Google Maps Garage. This is a regular show that we're doing on Google Developers Live. Google Maps Garage is where we talk about some of the technical aspects of working with the Google Maps API, delve into some code, and just sort through some common design patterns and problems, things that come up for developers. So this week I'm going to talk a little bit about working with some common JSON objects, parsing through to get out some data, and some gotchas that come up when people do that, and things that we will often see people ask questions about on Stack Overflow. This is the basic map here that I'll be working with, or at least the basic data. So this is the Google West Campus, which is a part of the main Googleplex here in Mountain View, California. And I've just highlighted 3 buildings that have large numbers of geoengineers in here. We fondly refer to this as the Geoplex. I'm just going to walk through a little bit how I created that. So first, though, I want to show you my data source. Very simple file here. This is the same data source that I'm going to use in every one of the samples today. So you see here, I just created a file, westcampus.js. I created a variable West Campus, and then as an array of JSON objects. Each has a name, latitude, and longitude. It's a very common way for people to express to create their data and load it into Google Maps or any other kind of JavaScript application. And I'm just going to say here that often when we talk about common problems that happen when building Google Maps applications, they're actually common JavaScript problems. There are a few things that are map specific, but in general, this is basically good JavaScript practice. So these things will help you out with other things as well. So you'll take a look here. One thing you'll see that I loaded a style sheet, which I do have created separately, the JavaScript loader for the Google Maps API, and then westcampus.js, which is the file I was just showing you. I created this initialize function here in the script tag. Now, generally, best practice is to create a separate file for all your JavaScript. Just for purposes of this video, I'm going to show it in this way. But basically, generally best practice is create an HTML file, create a CSS file, create at least one JavaScript file for loading in your JavaScript, and that way you get a separation of presentation, styling, and your code. Okay, so standard stuff here. I create the map and place it, center it, and set the road type and the zoom level. We talked about that a lot in the last Google Maps project. And then here, what I'm doing is I'm iterating over the West Campus array of objects. And so I do a for in loop. So I'm just saying for x in West Campus, each time I loop, it's going to create a new building object with West Campus, that particular reference to that particular object. Then I create a new location object, Google Maps.lat.long, building.lat, and building.lng. And then I create a new marker that has the location and the building name on it and set it onto the map. And then you'll see here, a lot of people use body on load to load their initialize function, but I prefer to use a google.maps.event add DOM listener to the window that waits for the page to load and then runs the initialization. That way, your body can continue to load even if the map hasn't loaded at that point. So that is what you get right here. And you notice that I used building.name for the title, which means that as I hover over a particular one, hopefully this will show up on video, I get a little tooltip there. Not a very sophisticated one, not like using an info window, but it gives you enough information without clicking on it to see what that object is. So I'm going to switch over now to adding in an info window and demonstrate at the same time a common problem. So this looks the same. This is a slightly different file. I'm going to click on one here, and you'll see that whichever one I click on, it's going to do West Campus 3 as the info window and load it up using that position as its location. So as I scroll through here, you can see we're doing pretty much the same thing. Then we're creating an info window for each one, and for the content, we're setting the content to the building name. And you'll notice that the last one is West Campus 3, and that's the one it's picking up for all the info windows. And then I am adding an event listener to each marker that says, when clicked on, open up the info window, and set it to the map and the marker. Now, what we're encountering here is a common JavaScript scoping problem. The problem is here that, yes, you're creating a new info window object each time, and you would think that when you create the event listener, you're actually telling it to open up that the info window that you're creating in that loop. The problem is that what's actually happening is that the event listener is only firing when you click on the marker. So what happens is it's picking up the last info window that was created, and that has the last name for its content. So that's a problem that's fairly easily solved, but it's one that comes up because scope just works a little bit differently than how you might expect if you're used to working with some other programming languages. So here's one way to fix the problem here. What I've done is I've created a separate add marker function. And so I loop through in the same way that I was doing before, and after I create the location, I create an add marker where I pass the building name, the map, and the location to that function. And then in that function, because this scope is by global or by function here, what we're seeing is that that actually works. So I create a new info window that's scoped in that function, and the event listener is created there, so it works just fine. So now as I load that, I click on each one, and you'll see that I get a separate info window. Now, what's interesting to note here is this doesn't work in the way that most maps applications you'll see out there work. Each info window that's created is doesn't automatically close the other info windows. So one solution to that problem, and by the way, some people do like to have multiple info windows up, which is why we allow you to do that. If you may remember back to V2, I believe you could only, the Google Maps API, you could only have one info window at a time. So now, if we look at this function add marker, what you'll see is when I click on it, that's when I create the info window. And I actually created a global variable called info window. And then I check to see if that exists, and if it does, then I close it. If it does not, well, regardless of whether it exists at that point, once I've closed it, it's gone away. And then I create a new info window at that location and pass it the map and marker. So the only time the info window is created is at event time. So we look here, and you'll see it's closing existing info windows and opening up a new one. So that's one good solution to this problem. So I just have a couple more quick demos here. This is creating a polyline using the same data set. And what you'll see here is as I'm looping through, I create these new Google Maps lat long objects, and then I push them into an array that I created called points. And then I create a polyline, pass it the path points and the map, and then it puts that onto the map. Now this is a standard JavaScript array. And you'll see here I've created something that looks exactly the same. And what I've done instead of creating a standard JavaScript array is create a Google Maps MVC array. Now MVC, the model view controller objects within Windows, that's, within Maps, that's something that we'll go into at probably in a later Google Maps Garage. But the MVC array is basically an array object that's defined within the JavaScript API that is much more optimized for use with the Google Maps API. And the reason you would want to use that is when you are using large numbers of points, you will find you'll get better performance using the standards MVC array. The Google Maps MVC array versus the standard JavaScript array. So I just wanted to call that out as a quick technique that you can use. And then finally today, I actually have just a little trick for you. I've got Google Earth open here. Now, often when I'm constructing something by hand, I have a little bit of trouble figuring out where exactly things go. So we can take a look here. In Google Earth, and I'll show you a little bit of what I've done. When I was creating this, I didn't have the latitude and longitude of the Google Maps the Google buildings. What I did was I just went into Google Earth and created a bunch of place marks. You'll see I have here the 2 place marks for these 2 buildings and also for the center here. And I do that pretty easily just by centering the map the Google Earth where I want it, creating a place mark by pushing on the little push pin right there. And then I can move that around to position it exactly where I want. And then I click OK. And then I just right-click or control-click and pull up get info on the, not get info, copy, create a new text document, and I've created a little bit of KML here. And so then what I can do is I can then just go into the coordinates tag and pull out the latitude and longitude that I need for my map. Now the reason I'm doing this is it saves a round trip for geocoding if I wanted to geocode, say, the Google West Campus 1, 2, and 3. The one thing to note is that in Google Earth, there are the latitude and longitude are reversed from their positions in Google Maps. So longitude comes first and then latitude. And so when you copy and paste those out, you need to just be aware of that. The other thing I do is the Google Earth will give you very high level of precision on the coordinates. I usually top that out at 6 decimal points. So just copy the first 6 after the decimal point, and then and take that and paste that into my code. So that's just a neat little trick that I use when I'm constructing my Google Maps apps and I need a latitude and longitude right away. All right, that's all we have for you in this week's episode of Google Maps Garage. Please join us next time. Thanks.